This week, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi joined the growing group of people calling for boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics around the world. There is condemnation against China for alleged abuses against their Muslim population, particularly the Uighurs in one province. China calls the allegations baseless. Our Bob Woodruff has been following the claims for years. In 2019, he traveled to Kazakhstan, a country bordering where many Muslims from China fled to. Many now say it's not safe for them there either. So he recently traveled to Turkey, where many are now going, only to hear from some that they don't feel safe there either. Tonight, Bob brings us part one of a two-story report on the allegations and the people caught in the middle.
Deep in Texas, more than 7,000 miles away from home, 7-year-old Bayan and her family are building a new life, a safer one. She and her mother, Gulzira Alkan, start the day early. This is Bayan's second week at her Midland, Texas school. Their friend from Kazakhstan is here too.
Hi, how's your English? 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yes, high five! All right.
When we last met them in the city of Almaty in Kazakhstan 2 years ago, they were all terrified. Gulzira was telling us a story about how she was allegedly tortured by the Chinese and how Bayan was unable to see her for nearly 2 years when just outside in the hall, the local police stormed in.
Police, police, police.
Immediately, Gulzira and Bayan fled the scene, and we were not far behind.
Now we're kind of walking down the stairs quickly to get out. We really have no idea what they're looking for.
In the office right down the hall, we had also interviewed that friend, activist Serikjan Bilash, and a flood of families desperate for his help. They all lost contacts with fathers, mothers, or children who they all claimed mysteriously disappeared in China.
My mother.
That's your mother. What happened to her?
Bilash was arrested not long after we left, ultimately allowed to avoid prison, he says, only if he agreed to stop representing Muslim Turkic families or anti-Chinese protesters in the future. He believes it was all because he was investigating these camps, often referred to by Chinese officials as vocational centers. This is where Bilash believes the missing relatives of those desperate families we met were being held. Facilities like these are located throughout China's Xinjiang province, where Turkic Muslims make up the majority of the region. 7% are Kazakh, like Gulzira and Bayan. 46% are known as Uighurs. Here, Turkic Muslims are allegedly being controlled, arrested, and tracked.
That region, Xinjiang region, it's the most encapsulated area in the world in terms of information. Uyghurs need to install app on their phone so China can track. China can have access what they're saying, what kind of picture and videos they're taking.
While this area only accounts for 1.5% of China's populations, it accounts for about 21% of the country's arrests. And Turkic Muslims make up almost all of these arrests.
It's considered suspicious. The app logs it. Authorities show up on your door and say, you've been praying too much, or why were you putting gas in somebody else's car? And if they don't like your answers, you can be detained for that.
After a rise in violence throughout Xinjiang in the last 20 years, Beijing blamed a radicalized group of Uyghurs for a series of attacks. And experts say that gave the government a scapegoat, turning this vibrant Muslim landscape into something of a police state.
Locking up 10% of the region's population is not an appropriate response. The overwhelming majority of people who have been detained are not in any way alleged to have broken a discernible law.
China is accused of committing a number of atrocities connected with their mistreatment of its Muslim population, and has been described by some at the highest levels of the U.S. government with one word: genocide.
My judgment remains that genocide was committed against the Uyghurs, and that hasn't changed.
The claim that there's genocide in Xinjiang could not be more absurd, said Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. It is just a rumor fabricated with ulterior motives and a complete lie. China denies any mistreatment of its Muslim populations, claiming what we often see as part of anti-terrorism and de-radicalization efforts in Xinjiang in accordance with the law to protect people's lives. But because police cut short our interviews 2 years ago, we never really learned all the details of what might have happened to Gulzira, Bayan, and Bilash. Now that they are safe in Texas, they have a lot to say.
Gulzira, tell me, what is it exactly that happened to you in China when you were put in one of those camps?
All day and all night, I sit like a school student.
Gulzira claims she was forced to learn Mandarin, forbidden to ever speak her native tongue. She says she and others were forced to take strange pills.
We have heard that there is some forced sterilization in China in these camps. Did you hear or see any of that?
In prison, they let women to meet with men, and they were giving some drugs before meeting when approaching the door. They gave a white pill and checked the mouth by hands. I think it was a birth control pill. It is forbidden to be pregnant.
The Chinese deny any form of forced sterilization in Xinjiang, but they do say that they have been promoting gender equality and birth control throughout the region, touting a lower Uyghur birth rate. A Chinese embassy tweet that Uyghur women were no longer baby-making machines was criticized online and removed from Twitter. But the statement citing one of their studies remains published in a newspaper owned by the Chinese Communist Party. Gulzira was released, she says, after 15 months in the camps, but shortly after, she says she was arrested for communicating with her husband and Bilash's organization.
They showed our conversation with my husband on the computer.
She says she was tortured. Her vivid account is similar to the accounts of other alleged camp survivors we interviewed in Kazakhstan back in 2019.
There was this kind of tiger chair.
Show me what that means.
She tells us that government officials made her sit back as they chained her legs and hands, then tying bricks to her hair, tightening the restraints so any movement would cause severe pain. Like many others, Gulzira told us she was originally thrown in the camps for one simple reason.
Because you went to Kazakhstan, you were imprisoned because you have a problem with your ideology.
The Chinese deny her allegations and say she left to Kazakhstan to avoid paying back a loan, releasing a series of videos in an attempt to discredit Gulzira and others with similar claims, even calling them actors. Kazakhstan is one of the 26 nations China has listed as, quote, sensitive countries that could potentially breed terrorism. But many fleeing Xinjiang seek haven in these countries, like Gulzira's family.
For 2 years you didn't see your mom?
But Kazakhstan began to feel unsafe after Bilash's arrest. He says 2 of his activist co-workers were attacked.
In same time in different cities by unknown persons. It means it is too dangerous to all of my team members. It is too dangerous to all of former detainees.
Out of fear, Gulzira and Bilash fled to Turkey, seeking refuge. The country is home to an estimated 50,000 Uyghurs, many from Xinjiang.
Asia over there, Europe over there.
We traveled to this boarding school just outside the city of Istanbul in western Turkey.
Yani yok. Kalp. Onlar gelmiyor. 4 yıldır gelmediler. Umudumu aslında.
Filled with Uyghur children, some as young as Bayan, some older.
Lütfen susmayın artık. Biz burada neler çekiyoruz. Her gün benim gibi ağlayan binlerce kişi var. Onlar o benim gibi ağlıyorlar ama kimse seslerini çıkarmıyor. Oturuyor böyle. Benim her gün ağlayasım var. Olmuyor ama yine de bu zulmü anlatmak bu benim mecburiyetim. Benim başıma da gelebilirdi onlar. Lütfen susmayın artık. Lütfen.
Many of them telling us the same story about going from one country to the next, trying to escape China's grasp. Their parents now missing.
The last time I spoke, I heard that my father was taken to the Chinese camp. Not just him, many relatives, my grandmother also. They are under repression.
This boy has lost all contact with his family in Xinjiang.
I think Turkey is walking a pretty fine line. Its economy clearly is not in great shape, and China has a lot to offer.
This country was once considered a welcome haven for Turkic Muslims, but now...
There's another spot where the Uyghurs are protesting.
I asked the Turkish government not to deport back our people.
Uyghurs here are increasingly concerned over China's growing foreign reach.
She separated from the 3 sons like 6 years ago, actually.
Is everybody afraid of being sent back to China?
Yes, of course.
At this protest outside China's consulate in Istanbul, the protesters were dragged away by police.
Are Uyghurs being sent back into China by countries?
Yes.
Against their will?
Yes. This government has really put pressure on governments in Central Asia and Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, and even in parts of Europe to send people back.
Abdusku Abul Basit says he was taken away by Turkish police in front of his young daughter, thrown in jail for the next 38 days.
They said, "We are the police." I said, "Okay," and opened the door. When they came in, they showed a document. Then they told me there was an investigation into me. My wife came out, and I told her to call my dad if anything happened, and I left with the police.
He told us the police came looking for a gun, but never found one. He believes he was branded a terrorist by the Chinese government, but with no proof, the Turkish police were forced to release him. With growing fears that China's influence could reach Balash and Gulzira's family in Turkey, they fled once again, this time here, the United States, perhaps one of the few real safe havens for this community. Bayan's family is applying for asylum so they could get permanent residence status with help from a nonprofit called China Aid.
When you landed in the United States, what did it feel like?
I felt happy when I arrived to America. I'm happy that I'm alive. I'm here abroad. There are so many Kazakh and Uyghur people suffering like me.
In this country, Gulzira's daughter can celebrate her heritage with her family, a privilege not afforded to others. Something she can do now without looking over her shoulder. Bob Woodruff, ABC News.
And we did reach out to Turkish officials for comment based on our reporting there. We did not get a response back. Our thanks to Bob for that.